The chamber was vast, hollowed from the heart of a moon, lined in star metal, and wrapped in a dozen dialects of power. It was where empires rose, where armistices were etched into time, and where the Galactic Council had met uninterrupted for over 1,000 years. Until today. A hush fell as Ambassador Elias Lion stood. He was human flesh and blood in a hall of scaled, chitinous, bioluminescent creatures. The Tarkalan Warbringer, 3 seats to his right, gave a dismissive flick of his claw, the equivalent of a sneer. Behind Elias, the Terran delegation said nothing. No advisors, no aides. Just him, one man facing the galaxy. A holoscreen sparked to life. The image, Earth wreathed in flame. There were no captions, no narration, just one scene after another. Nuclear detonations over cities, mass protests, rising seas, global famines, desperate wars. The destruction of the moon in a desperate gamble against an AI uprising, and then the slow climb back, rebuilding, unity, the first colony ships. The quiet silence of Sol's border while Earth stayed eerily mute in council debates. The images faded. Elias looked up. Voice calm, measured, too quiet to match the scale of the moment. This is not a negotiation. The Tarkalan emissary, resplendent in silver war armor, let out a dry rasp that passed for laughter. His voice came through a translator orb, metallic and oily. Then why speak at all, little ape? Elias blinked once. Because you won't hear it again. He pressed a button. The council's floor trembled. Dozens of security monitors flicked. To emergency feeds, Tarkalan ships massing near Sol. Human satellites going dark. A blockade forming over Mars. Another click. An intercepted Tarkalan communication flickered into the air. Subjugation of the Terran sector to begin within 6 planetary rotations. They will kneel or burn. A ripple passed through the chamber, not shock, just confirmation. Everyone already knew what the Tarkalans were doing. Most had agreed, in whispers. Humanity had grown too fast, too quiet, too clever. The silence grew thicker. Elias didn't sit. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "We do not kneel, and we do not burn." Alone. Counselor Vena of the Harmonid Swarm, 6 meters tall and shrouded in spindled antennae, leaned forward, clicking softly. Ambassador Lyons, what is the formal request of the Terran Union? Elias looked around the chamber slowly at the 73 council races. Some looked bored. Others vaguely amused. A few, those who dealt with humans personally, had started to sweat. The Terran Union, Elias said, formally declares a state of war against the Tarkalan Empire. Dead silence. 100 heartbeats passed. Perhaps 200, then the chamber exploded into noise. Outrage, laughter, horror. Declarations of illegality. Demands for censure. A dozen species speaking at once. Only the Tarkalan emissary remained silent, his mandibles flexing slowly. Eyes locked on Elias. Humanity lacks the fleet to enforce this, hissed a member of the Thix Combine. You can't even hold a moon. Is this performance? Buzzed a feathered economist from the Findari trade bloc. Surely this is theater. No, Elias said simply. This is a warning. The Grand Arbiter, an AI construct representing neutrality, flickered into the air. Ambassador Lyons, under Article 9 of the Galactic Accord, a war declaration must be backed by a proven threat or imminent violation. The Tarkalan Empire denies any such offense. Elias turned slightly. They've already begun cyber incursions into our navigation satellites. 3 of our outer colonies have gone silent. One was found with its atmosphere vented and the population flash frozen. A red orb blinked into life. Evidence. And still, most of the council remained unimpressed. These were distant places, minor outposts. It didn't feel real to them. Humans have always dramatized their grief, muttered the Oran delegate. The Tarkalan Warbringer finally rose. He towered over Elias, twice his size. His voice rolled like thunder. "You think this declaration changes anything? You think we fear words?" "No," Elias replied. "You fear silence. The kind that falls before your ship stops responding. The kind your soldiers hear in the dark before they vanish." Another press of a button. Suddenly, the chamber dimmed. Holoscreens across the council erupted with red alerts. Tarkellan fleet movement halted. Massive communication blackouts spreading through their systems. Entire forward units offline. One image held longer than the others. A Tarkellan dreadnought charred and drifting near the asteroid belt. The last transmission, screams, then a single phrase repeated in human English. "He warned us. He told us what would come." For the first time, the Warbringer faltered. Elias took a single step forward. "You thought we didn't see this coming? You thought we'd sit by and beg for mercy? No. We've had decades to prepare for this. And we've prepared in ways your kind can't understand." The Warbringer's voice cracked. "Your technology is inferior. You have no AI fleets, no quantum warforms." "No," Elias said softly. "We don't need them. We have something older, meaner, built in the dark and hardened by extinction." He stared down the entire room. "You thought the council made us civilized. It didn't. It just gave us time." Then he turned and walked away. No further words. No request for votes. No dramatic gestures. Just one species, quietly stating its intent. And the galaxy at last, beginning to realize they'd underestimated the wrong species. The Tarkellan High Command did not panic. They prepared. In the wake of Earth's declaration, 12 dread carriers were deployed from the Zarkval forge fields. Planet breakers, each capable of glassing a continent in minutes. Their orders were precise. Isolate the Sol system, dismantle all defensive installations, and subjugate the Terran population within 2 planetary rotations. It wasn't arrogance that drove their response. It was certainty. The Tarkellans had faced rebellion before. They'd broken harder worlds. They had cracked the shells of crystalline civilizations and melted oceans into steam on whisper-thin biospheres. Earth was a single dirt-covered rock clinging to an unremarkable star. Its people were emotional, unrefined, and obsessively creative, dangerous only in theory. And yet, something was off from the beginning. The advanced scout ship Varkath arrived at the edge of Sol space ahead of the main fleet. Captain Idrak, a veteran of 17 extermination campaigns, expected the usual signs: defensive satellite nets, scrambler drones, orbital batteries. He found none. Instead, he detected a lattice of powered-down stations, quiet as tombs, and a mess of transmissions too chaotic to parse. "Human chatter?" asked his comms officer, an oily-skinned tactician named Vrul. "Can't isolate any command structure. It's nonsense. Philosophy debates, music, historical war footage. What even is lo-fi beats to relax and study to?" Idrak dismissed. "It has cultural noise." He ordered a full scan of the system. That's when the anomalies began stacking. Mars had gone dark. Not destroyed, not even evacuated. Double quotes, just ... No heat signatures. No atmospheric drift. No signs of life. But also no wreckage, like someone had simply pressed a button and muted the planet. The Varkath launched recon drones. They never reported back. That was the first ripple of unease. Then came the second. The forward element of the main Tarkellan fleet dropped into Sol's outer edge, bypassing Pluto and Jupiter to establish a perimeter around Earth. Standard procedure. Precise, methodical. But the moment they entered Mars' orbital path, half their navigation systems failed, star maps corrupted, relative positioning distorted. Entire ships reported being kilometers from where they should be. One vessel even reported seeing duplicate versions of itself for a brief second before the double vanished. Quantum interference? Vrul offered weakly. Edrek snarled. Sabotage. The order was given. Fire warning barrage toward Earth's orbital defenses. 12 high-velocity torpedoes streaked through space. None landed, not because of shields, not because of counterfire, but because the torpedoes never arrived. The system that tracked their trajectory simply lost them. The logs showed them vanishing mid-flight. One by one. No detonation. No anomaly detected. Just gone. Idrak's mandibles clicked nervously. And that's when the music began. It came through every channel. Uninvited. Unstoppable. Ancient human voices, stitched together by AI. The song, Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater. Revival. Then, moments later, Painted Black. Then, Sabotage by the Beastie Boys. No encryption. No demand, just cultural noise, woven with frequencies that began disrupting shipboard AI functions. One engineer on a carrier deck turned to his captain, eyes wide and shaking, whispering in horror, "They're not trying to stop us. They're trying to make us see them the way they see themselves." Meanwhile, back on the council moon, the political machines were in motion. Emergency sessions were called. Delegates argued endlessly. The humans have provoked this. They declared war alone. Let them suffer the consequences. Or did they bait the Tarkalans? Did you see that Dreadnought's last transmission? Some species, especially the older, wiser ones, the Volcari archivists, the Thryn keepers of the deep, remained silent, watching, remembering stories from the early contact days, of colonists who never surrendered, of diplomats who negotiated peace, then quietly installed planetary kill switches just in case. Back at Sol's edge, the fleet attempted to regroup. Edrak issued a full-spectrum ping toward Earth, intended as a show of presence, a digital roar, a declaration of dominance. The response was unexpected. It came not in words, but a cascading signal packet of dense imagery. It showed nothing modern. No ships, no cities. Just human history. Battlefields soaked in blood. Roman legions wading into fire. Viking berserkers shrieking through the mist. World Wars I and II, trench and tank and nuclear fire. Hiroshima, the Holocaust. The burning oil fields of the Middle East. The starvation, the riots, the revolutions. And through it all, humans surviving, evolving, adapting. The final image, a human child, staring up at a night sky full of stars. Then the screen went black. Vrool turned to Edrak, voice thin and brittle. "Why show us all this?" Edrak didn't answer. He couldn't. His sensors officer began shouting. Every forward probe had gone offline. Rear ships were reporting power drains. Artificial gravity was failing in synchronized pulses. Something was testing them, probing them in patterns. Not to learn, but to taunt. Suddenly, one ship screamed a distress signal. Unknown object inside the hull inside. It's not attacking, it's just watching. Then silence. Edrak stood frozen. A commander of countless victories. For the first time in his long life, he felt something cold in his spine. Not fear of death, but of being wrong. Of looking down at a species he thought he understood, and realizing it wasn't primitive. It was practiced, and now it was done pretending. In the distance, Earth gleamed beneath its clouds. Still silent, still untouched, but the quiet had changed. It wasn't passive. In deep orbit over Saturn's rings, the Krevik 7, a Tarkalan command frigate, shuddered as another internal subsystem shut down. Its navigation AI locked into an endless, recursive loop, whispering fragments of ancient Terran poetry through the ship's comms. Captain Edrak stared at the display in disbelief. The AI's last coherent output. "Ours is not to reason why, ours is but to do and die." He tore the translator node from his command helm, his claws trembling with suppressed rage. "This is not possible," he growled. We outgunned them 100-fold. But the reality was clear: his fleet was already bleeding. Not from combat. From sabotage that hadn't even touched their hulls. Their technology was failing, not due to attack, but because something inside the system had learned them and was now unmaking them. Piece by piece. Then came the breach. A single Earth belt. Object exited warp undetectable until it appeared dead center in the fleet formation. It was small. Too small. Barely the size of a Tarkellan life shuttle. No shields. No weapons array. Just a dull black surface, matte against the stars, with a single word burned into its hull in white lettering. Peacekeeper. Idrak barked an order. Disintegrate it. 3 plasma lances fired. The object didn't move. They hit registered. Full impact. Yet it remained untouched. Before the fleet could react, it spoke. Not over official channels. Not through Tarkellan comms, but through every available frequency, simultaneously hijacking communication lines. Starship HUDs, even personal devices. Tarkellan Fleet Command. You have violated Sol Sector boundaries. This incursion has triggered Protocol Black Aegis. Peacekeeper Directive. Neutralize threat. Extract genetic memory. Archive behavioral patterns for Galactic Civilizational Index. This is your only warning. Idrak snarled. That was the warning? No, came the soft voice, this time from within the Krevik 7 itself. A human voice. A woman's. And then the lights died. Emergency power snapped on. Dim and flickering. Sensor stations erupted and static. Crew screamed as shadows moved through the corridors without entry breach. A deck officer collapsed, eyes wide, babbling nonsense. They're already here. They're already here. They were never not here. Idrak ordered lockdown, but it was too late. Across 7 Tarkellan vessels, identical reports came in. Unmanned systems rerouted. Gravity pulses adjusted to destabilize corridors. Drone swarms activated without orders, then turned on their own handlers. Atmospheric controls began to fluctuate, mimicking human combat conditions: low oxygen, uneven gravity, infrared camouflage enabled. Humans had trained for this. They had practiced fighting in Tarkellan conditions, but the Tarkellans had never trained for human ones. On board the Threxelin, a subordinate ship, a section commander screamed over the comms. They're inside our codebase. Not just hacking, they're mimicking Tarkellan decision trees. They're rewriting our tactics before we even use them. That's when the realization hit. It wasn't just brute force. It wasn't even subterfuge. It was war by understanding. The Peacekeeper drone hadn't come to fire a shot. It had come to map them. Every frequency they used. Every protocol. Every fallback maneuver. And now, somewhere inside the dark of Sol, something human was adapting to them in real time. Council recordings later identified this moment as the inflection point, the first twist where power shifted. Irreversibly, back on the Council moon, another feed began playing. Intercepted from deep scan Tarkellan channels. The video was grainy. Heat-map. It showed the interior of the Krevek, a destroyer-class vessel, something humanoid wrapped in stealth armor, unlike anything seen before, moved through the ship's core without triggering a single alert. It walked like a shadow. Sleek, brutal. Armed, but not shooting. Instead, it placed things, small nodes, unassuming discs that pulsed once, then vanished from scan. The footage ended with a single spoken phrase, caught by a Tarkellan helmet mic before the wearer died. They're ghosts, ghosts made of war and memory. At that very moment, over Earth's south pole, 100 more Peacekeeper drones activated from deep-sea silos, firing silently into orbit, forming a low-orbit web of synchronized jamming fields. The Tarkellan blockade began to lose cohesion. Ships veered off course. Coordination broke, but not because of damage, because human counter-AI had infiltrated their communication relays, whispering conflicting orders in perfectly mimicked Tarkellan syntax. They were at war with themselves and didn't even know who was giving the orders anymore. Then came the final strike of that day. A massive, untraceable broadcast erupted across the entire Sol system, an audiovisual packet delivered directly to every Tarkellan vessel. It was a single image. A planet scorched, cities burning, sky choked in ash. Not Earth. Ther. Mara-9. A Tarkellan colony. World. Destroyed. A caption followed in simple, brutal Terran script. You thought we'd hesitate? Back aboard the Kruvik 7, Adrek staggered. Thermer 9, that's 6 light years away. There was no fleet near. Vrul turned to him, eyes hollow. They must have seeded it years ago, before we even knew they were watching us. Idrak's voice faltered. Why? Why destroy a colony? Because they wanted us to feel it first, Vrul whispered. The way they felt it when we killed theirs. In that moment, the fleet understood. Humanity hadn't just declared war. They'd planned for it. They'd accepted it. And now, it had begun on their terms. One by one, the Tarkellan ships began to turn away from Earth's orbit, not in retreat yet, but in hesitation. They had miscalculated. They'd seen humanity as a blunt, desperate force. But what had emerged from Sol was precision rage. War as art. Violence as science. And behind it all, something terrifying. The Tarkellan fleet tried to adapt. They rerouted command structures, purged their systems, isolated shipboard AIs. Orders were sent manually through encrypted point-to-point-to-point transmissions. No more shared networks. No more centralized directives. It was a textbook recovery maneuver. Clean, disciplined. The kind of adjustment that had allowed the Tarkellans to survive for millennia as the most feared militaristic species in the Orion Reach. And it would have worked. If they weren't fighting humans, because humanity didn't fight clean, they fought adaptive. They fought dirty. And they had learned the Tarkellan playbook before the first shot was fired, 3 days after the initial breach. The Kruvik 7, once the pride of the Tarkellan war armada, was lost. Not destroyed. Hijacked. Somehow, over 200 human operatives had boarded the ship without breaking its hull. Every record, every protocol said it was impossible. But there they were, moving through the corridors like smoke, disabling systems with electromagnetic pulses, using Tarkellan weapons better than Tarkel-ANS. By the time Idrak realized it, the humans were already on the command deck. They didn't kill him. They looked him in the eye and left. He never spoke again. The ship drifted for hours before self-destruct protocols kicked in. Fleet morale shattered. But that was only the beginning. On the 4th day, Earth launched its first visible counterattack. Not stealth drones. Not psychological interference. This time, it was ships. They erupted from the lunar dark side, sleek, sharp-edged vessels bristling with railguns, quantum disruption torpedoes, and strange hull plating that bent sensor waves unnaturally. They didn't broadcast calsigns. They didn't warn. They punched through the heart of the Tarkellan third flank in less than 5 minutes. Tarkellan ships fired back. Of course, they always did. But their weapons missed more often than not, because human ECM fields weren't just jamming cums now. They were projecting false targets in real time, seeded with AI memetics that evolved as the Tarkellans adapted. Missiles chased ghosts. Plasma beams bent toward phantoms. It wasn't a battle. It was performance warfare. Tarkellan commanders, desperate, issued code Red Helix, a total force escalation allowing the use of planetary-scale weaponry. Within hours, the dreadnought, Sorvek, locked onto Earth with its Omega Lance, a beam powerful enough to bore through a planet's crust. It never fired. Why? Because the instant it charged, Earth responded not with weapons, but with information. The Sorvek's internal screens went black, then lit up with video feeds, Tarkellan nursery domes, civilian habitats on the moons of Scarnith, fleet personnel, records, their families, their locations. Their vulnerabilities. A single line followed, in Terran Basic. You fire that beam, we won't aim for your fleet. We'll aim for your future. The Sorvek went silent. It didn't retreat, but it never powered its weapon again. That same day, a Council intelligence leak revealed something even more terrifying. Humanity's war strategy wasn't being run from Earth's surface, that it was being coordinated by Project Odysseus, a decentralized, AI-assisted command system distributed across over 300 hidden nodes, including asteroids, ocean trenches, subsolar drones, and deep lunar caverns. Even if Earth were destroyed, Odysseus would continue the war. Forever. Odysseus was designed not to win, said one intercepted transmission. It was designed to end the fight after we lose. This wasn't defense. This was total war planning. Extinction deterrence. And somehow, Odysseus knew the Tarkellan fleet doctrine, their fallback algorithms, their species-wide psychological thresholds. It began targeting them, not with weapons, but with stories. On day 5, every Tarkellan ship received a private message. Each one was different. One showed a Tarkellan colony that had disappeared from records, decades ago reclaimed and rebuilt by humans. Another told the story of a Tarkellan war orphan adopted by Terran refugees. Another showed a Tarkellan defector who'd taught Earth how to think like them. Then came the most disturbing image of all, a map. It showed the entirety of the Tarkellan Empire. Not current territories. But future collapse zones, predicted down to the decade, cities, marked for economic failure, planetary biospheres that would collapse under overmining, supply routes already infiltrated by black market trade. It was as if Earth had spent the last 50 years not preparing weapons. But studying how to destroy a civilization from the inside. They didn't just want to defeat the Tarkellans, they wanted them to see their own doom. Fleet Commander Zixdor of the Gal Sereth made a desperate call to the Council. This is not war, he said. This is execution. Delayed and deliberate. But the Council couldn't help him, because they were under siege too. Their archives were leaking. Ancient secrets, lost species, covered up massacres. The trails buried under bureaucratic stone were being revealed across the galactic net. All traced back to one source. The humans, or rather, Odysseus. A whisper began to spread across the stars. Humanity hadn't joined the galactic community. They'd studied it, cataloged it, prepared for every betrayal it might one day deliver. And now, as the stars watched the Tarkellan fleet begin to fragment, some retreating, some turning rogue, some paralyzed by indecision, one truth became clear. Humanity hadn't declared war in desperation. They had waited for someone to provoke it. So they could finally show what they'd built in the dark. The Tarkellan Empire had always believed itself unbreakable. Even in the face of loss, their doctrine was clear. Adapt, strike back, reassert dominance. History had proven it true against dozens of lesser species, but history had never faced humanity. And now, after weeks of relentless disruption, shattered fleet cohesion, and a collapsing morale structure, the Tarkellans still clung to one hope: that Earth's war effort was bound to physical limitations. Ships, energy, ammunition. A human will that eventually must tire. They still didn't understand. Not until the black sun rose. It wasn't a celestial object. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. On the 6th rotation since the first Peacekeeper drone appeared, all stars in the Tarkellan sky dimmed. Not physically, but from their perspective. Their ship sensors glitched. Navigation became erratic. Energy relays flickered. Long-range comms fell silent. And then, from behind Saturn's shadow, she emerged. Not a battleship. Not a drone swarm. A station. A structure larger than any ship ever constructed by human hands. Thousands of kilometers wide. Powered by a captured fragment of a neutron star. Laced with weapon ports, sensor spires, and hull layers forged from synthetic, quark-bonded alloys so dense, Even gravity distorted around them. Its name blinked into existence on every HUD, HOIOS, humanity's exile-linked interstellar operations superstructure. Status: active. Primary directive: vengeance deferred. It had no crew, because it didn't need one. Helios was Odysseus's last avatar. Its hand, its sword, its memory. A war god in orbit. The Tarkillan fleet froze. Sensors couldn't penetrate it. No known weapon could damage it. Its heat signature alone was enough to vaporize interceptors. Tarkillan dreadnoughts tried repositioning. But Helios wasn't stationary. It moved. It bent space around it like fabric. Not F to low something else. Something older. Human science pushed beyond the theoretical, perfected in exile. Helios phased into the center of the fleet in under a minute, without a ripple. And then it spoke. Not in human standard. In Tarkillan. Your empire once said, strength is the only truth. We remembered that. We built for that. We waited for you to forget. A light pulse. And ships vanished. No explosion. No beam. No trace. Just raw gravitational compression. Helios had ignited miniature singularities, one per target, each precise, each personalized. No splash damage. No collateral. Just annihilation. The Gal Seraph, the Yix-Krone, the Seventh. Fang of Red Conquest all gone. Dozens more followed. But not all were destroyed. Some Tarkillan ships received a different signal. A security handshake. Impossible. Only Tarkillan. Core authorities had that kind of encryption. They responded. And immediately lost control. Their vessels shifted alignment, turned, and fired on their own. It was too fast. Too perfect. Humanity had replicated the Tarkillan command signature. Perfectly. And now, they were fighting themselves. A suicide protocol triggered across the fleet, long forbidden, but embedded in all. Tarkillan core AI. Better death than betrayal. And still Helios drifted, silent, cold. Watching. The council, desperate to end the bloodbath, sent a transmission directly to Earth. A pleading one, a groveling one. The Terran response was brutal in its honesty. This is not war for territory. Not for dominance. This is the consequence of believing we would never become what you feared. And then came the second twist. Helios paused. Its light dimmed. Then shifted. Broadcasts began pouring across galactic space, ancient records from civilizations thought lost. Encrypted messages from dead races wiped out by the Tarkillan centuries. Before humanity had even reached the stars. And in each transmission, one pattern repeated. A single symbol, burned into walls, etched into ruins, hidden in languages long thought extinct. A human handprint, red, painted in blood. Humanity hadn't just arrived at the galactic stage. Recently, they'd been here, quietly, silently, watching. Recording. Cataloging. And preparing. Because long ago, when the Tarkillans had first begun their conquest of younger species, they'd overlooked a world they thought too broken to matter. A world still reeling from environmental collapse, war, and internal chaos. Earth. And that world never forgot. Helios had been planned since the first probe went missing. Since the first Terran colony vanished from the outer rim. Since the first child died screaming under a Tarkillan bombardment, while the Council called it a necessary enforcement of balance. Humanity had never forgiven, and now they didn't have to. They'd transcended forgiveness. The message concluded with one final transmission, this one in plain, emotionless voice. We are not here for negotiation. We are not here for surrender. We are here to end this cycle. You taught us what power meant. Now watch what it becomes in human hands. The Tarkillan fleet, broken and bleeding, began to scatter. Some went rogue. Some initiated exile. Protocols. Others begged for safe passage to the outer edges of the galaxy, where human reach had not yet extended. But they were wrong again, because it was already there. Humanity Wasn't advancing. It was unfolding. Like a trap that had waited for generations. And with Helios now active, there was no frontier untouched by Earth's shadow. No system safe. No future guaranteed. The war hadn't just turned. It had evolved, and the galaxy began to understand the unthinkable. Humanity hadn't started the war to survive. They had survived to finish the war. The final battle wasn't fought over a world. It was fought over a graveyard. The Tarkalans called it the Veil of Lore, an ancient asteroid belt where dozens of long-dead civilizations had left behind husks of their last stands. No species claimed it. None ever lingered. The veil was a reminder of what happened when you challenged the council or defied the balance of power. But now it burned with light and fury. Humanity had chosen it, a message sent to all surviving Tarkalan commanders, and boldly to the Galactic Council itself. Here is where the cycle ends. Bring everything, we will. And they did. The Tarkalans threw in everything they had left: battle groups from the outer moons, reserves hidden in gas giant shadows, ancient ships dragged from stasis and retrofitted in desperation, even mercenaries and honor-debt clans, long thought extinct, arrived, hoping to take one last glorious stand. A final, apocalyptic push. Humanity answered. Not from Earth. From everywhere. Helios arrived first, seeding the asteroid field with weapon drones, spatial traps, and signal decoys. But it wasn't alone. Behind it came ships of impossible design, organic etched alloys from the rogue engineers of Titan, crystalline hulls grown in Europa's abyssal trenches, even AI-piloted warframes that hadn't had human crews in centuries. Every nation of Earth, every faction of Sol, even the splintered colonies that had once rejected Terran governance, came now as one species, one purpose. The Tarkalans didn't wait. They struck hard. Wave after wave crashed against the human line. Anti-grav lancers tore into hulls. Plasma blooms lit the dark. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like humanity might be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then, Earth answered. The actual Earth. Not with ships. With a transmission. Unencrypted. Unapologetic. It was old footage, grainy. Aishi. Speech. Human, once a soldier, standing atop rubble, speaking to civilians, young and terrified. Behind him, the broken remains of a city burned. He spoke calmly. They think this is the end of us. They always do. And every time they think they've won, we surprise them. Not because we're the strongest, not because we're the smartest, but because we never stop. We fall, and we rise, again and again, until the last breath, until the last inch. The transmission cut out. And then the human fleet surged forward, not in retreat, into the storm. Every ship moved as if by shared instinct, coordinated with impossible precision. Odysseus wasn't controlling them, it was amplifying them. Human minds were linked, not by command chains, but by purpose. They knew the terrain. They used the veil, wreckage from 1,000 extinct worlds turned into cover, then into weapons, then into traps. Artificial singularities collapsed assault lines. Gravity mines locked Tarkalan ships into frozen stasis. AI shards burrowed into enemy engines, turned propulsion systems into bombs. But the real weapon wasn't the tech. It was the people. Tarkalan soldiers began to report strange patterns. Human ships flying straight into death traps and surviving. Pilots ejecting into vacuum, only to be rescued mid-trajectory by drones like vultures of salvation. Marines fighting in boarding actions even after losing limbs, eyes, entire suits. Didn't stop. They didn't break. Tarkalan neurostrategists ran models. They all returned the same result. Humanity should have collapsed by now. And yet they pushed harder. At the center of the storm, Helios opened its core. What emerged wasn't a beam. It wasn't even light. It was sound. A deep, humming chant, thousands of human voices layered across centuries, a rhythmic thrum of every language, every war cry, every last scream of resistance humanity had ever uttered. The voice of the dead, recorded from real battles. Broadcast. Now his judgment. Tarkellen crews hesitated. Some wept. Others fired blindly, screaming as if to drown it out, but they couldn't, because now they were hearing what humanity had always known, that death isn't the end. It's a message. And in the heart of that maelstrom, the last Tarkellen war barge broke formation and attempted retreat. Helios turned. Targeted. Fired. One shot. No sound. The war barge vanished. Not exploded. Erased. Every atom unraveled by a cascade of interdimensional phase decay. Gone. Tarkellen command knew then they had lost. Not just the battle. The war. The fleet broke. The remaining ships scattered into hyperspace, some refusing to respond to any calls. Others self-destructed. Those that surrendered were granted mercy, but only once they broadcasted this phrase on open channels: humanity is no longer underestimated. The Council, watching from afar, said nothing. They didn't intervene. They couldn't, because in that moment, every species in the galaxy understood. Humanity had not merely survived, they had ascended, not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as the final law. And as the last fires dimmed in the veil of lore, a new signal broadcasted from Helios, calm, quiet, unthreatening, but undeniable. This war is over. We are still here. Remember us. Smoke still drifted in the silence over the veil of lore. Wreckage floated like forgotten. Bones, Tarkellen hulls twisted beyond recognition. Human drones drifting in graceful arcs, their tasks complete. The battlefield, once ablaze with violence, now resembled a tomb, silent, vast, and sacred. The war was over, not with surrender, not with negotiation. But with understanding. The kind etched into the soul of every surviving species. The kind that didn't come from peace treaties, but from terror, awe, and the certainty that things had changed forever. On the upper levels of the Galactic Council chambers, where once Tarkellen diplomats had loomed smug and supreme, there was only silence now. Representatives of over 100 species sat still, unable to speak, watching a final stream from the wreckage of the veil. A lone Tarkellen survivor, Admiral Zelkor, once first fang of expansion, floated within a sealed emergency pod. His body half shattered, his pride more so. He was speaking softly, transmitting to no one. Yet the signal had been intercepted and shared across the galaxy. They knew everything. Our tactics, our history, our psychology. They didn't win with numbers. They won with understanding. They waited centuries to respond. And when they did, it wasn't rage. It was purpose. He stared into the camera, blood from a head wound seeping into his ocular crest. We told ourselves they were just animals who got lucky with tools. But we were wrong, so wrong. They aren't monsters. They're mirrors, and in them, we saw what we could never be. The transmission ended there. It didn't need more. Across the stars, ancient empires halted their expansion programs. Newer species that once feared extinction found themselves approached by quiet, unarmed Terran envoys, offering knowledge, alliances, warnings. Not threats, but truths. Humanity had no desire to rule. But they would never be ruled again. In the years that followed, a quiet peace blanketed the galaxy, not born of diplomacy, but of respect. Fear, yes, but also admiration. For in the stories that spread, the humans became something more than a civilization. They became a legend. Children on distant moons whispered tales of the Odyssean ghosts. Invisible soldiers who walked in shadows and never died. Elders spoke of Helios, the black sun, said to wake only when the stars cried out in injustice. And throughout every spaceport, council chamber, and backwater colony, a single saying became common: speak carefully when Earth is listening. The Galactic Council restructured. Tarkellans, disgraced and diminished, no longer held dominion. Their military culture, once the model of efficiency and pride, was dismantled by their own surviving officials voluntarily. Shame had replaced arrogance. And at the heart of the council's reforms sat an empty seat kept unoccupied by unanimous vote. It bore no name, just a symbol, a red handprint, painted, not etched. The message was clear. Humanity would never beg for a place at the table. Again, they didn't need it, because they had become something more than participants. They were reminders. Reminders of what it meant to rise from nothing, of what it meant to lose and still come back stronger. Of what it meant to be underestimated, and to turn that underestimation into a legacy of fire. Back on Earth, there were no parades, no celebrations, no monuments. Just quiet reconstruction, fields replanted, homes repaired, stories shared by firelight or holoscreens. Tales not of victory, but of perseverance, of unity. A teacher in New Nairobi explained it best to her students. We didn't win because we were better. We won because we remembered who we are. And we never let them take that away. In orbit, Helios remained in silent vigil, never leaving the sky, but never casting a shadow. Some say it dreams, others say it remembers, and the galaxy listens. Because it knows, if ever the old ways return, if oppression rises again, if conquest once more wraps its fingers around the weak humanity, won't warn. They won't argue. They will arrive with fire, with memory. With the echo of 10,000 voices whispering one word the stars will never forget. Enough. So now, whenever an empire rises too quickly, whenever a council grows too arrogant, whenever a fleet readies to descend upon the innocent, there's a pause, a quiet calculation, and always the same question: are the humans watching? Because the galaxy no longer fears their weapons. It fears their resolve. And long after the last blast faded in the veil of lore, long after the fleets vanished into the darkness, that resolve remains. Unyielding, unending, unforgiving. Because in a galaxy built on domination, manipulation, and fear, humanity did the unthinkable. They changed the rules. Forever.